Thank you for stopping by for Monster Monday, the best way to start your week. We're getting a little wild this time as we return to the world of Monster Hunter and continue our pursuit of these paramount predators. Our last image critter was the Balahara, so following that line, next up is the pioneer beast, the Doshaguma. This powerful bear-like beast has some canine traits mixed into its design, such as their habit of traveling in packs. However, these packs are prone to infighting and are highly aggressive with each other, leading to only the strongest serving as their leader, as it can bully around its packmates. While one of the mightier entries in the early part of the game, the Doshaguma is a brutal and straightforward combatant that simply brings its strength to bear. But its might is often enough that it can do so. We're looking at a fairly simplistic monster, one that has a loose propensity to work together and fights using its considerable strength rather than any fancy tricks or elements. This is perhaps the most obvious animal that I've made for Monster Hunter, but I was wondering about its level a bit. It comes right after the Balahara, but it's shown in a cutscene tangling with a trio of them. However, according to my sources on the Discord, this is likely just a case of cutscene power to the max, not that it's actually that much more powerful. With that settled, I landed on level 7 for the Doshaguma and sought to build it somewhere between a brute and a soldier, with it becoming a bit more of the latter once it becomes enraged. With the heavy focus on the Doshaguma's sheer might, I decided to use an extreme strength score for it. That might be a bit much for a level 7 creature, but I personally think it fits a beast that doesn't have anything going for it beyond its pure power. However, already using extreme value made me shy away from taking a high value elsewhere, so its constitution is between moderate and high, making it a burly and beefy beast. Its wisdom is between low and moderate, and could probably just be low, but lets it better hunt down and seek out prey. This leaves its dexterity as properly low, as it's not the most nimble of beasts. It mostly just powers through the blows of its enemies. Outside of its ability scores, it has a moderate perception with 2 unique senses. I included dark vision as it seems to operate without issue in the darkness when first encountered, and it also has an imprecise scent ability, inspired by some of its more canine aspects. I decided to lean into the low dexterity when it comes to skills and didn't even include an acrobatic skill for it. Instead, it starts with an extreme athletics, which it will use to bully around foes and make use of for some grappling for reasons I will reveal below. I also wanted it to have a high intimidation to keep with that sort of bullying build, letting it cow its minions into obedience. This high value becomes low when it does this to a creature that it doesn't share a language with, which suits the design well enough for me to work with. Regarding the defenses of the Doshaguma, I kind of waffled back and forth on a few aspects before I settled on using a moderate armor class for it. This leans into its brutal nature, but there's a part of me that wonders if this isn't too much. Its components have an armor class 1 point right above high, and includes a soft belly that's a little different than my usual design. Rather than being something that can be destroyed or disabled, players can target the Doshaguma's belly to deal damage with a weakness to the pool of its standard hit points. Speaking of, its hit points are high due to the inclusion of this feature, as well as the innate weakness to fire that it already has. That leaves us with its saving throws to discuss, which feature an extreme fortitude save, but low saves for the remaining 2. Hopefully this extreme save will balance the other 2 things out, as I am a little worried about the Doshaguma being a mite too fragile. However, it has some decent ability to lock down and limit others, which might keep it copacetic. For the offenses of the Doshaguma, there are 3 strikes in its arsenal. Its first 2 melee strikes use a high attack bonus and both have a reach of 10 feet. Its claws additionally have the agile trait and the grab ability, making use of that extreme athletics, both of which lead to it only using a moderate amount of damage. Its jaws lack this trait or ability, so they have a high damage value, to give it a bite far worse than its bark. That leaves the Doshaguma's single range strike, its Brutal Toss. As the name suggests, this comes with the Brutal trait and a range of 40 feet, but still only uses a moderate attack bonus. However, its damage is variable, and there are still some details of that worth discussing. So that's the first thing we're going to talk about. In-game, the Doshaguma will occasionally lob corpses of critters at its competitors, but I wanted to expand on that concept slightly. To that end, I added our brutal burly beasty could also hurl creatures that it has restrained. Notably, the creature specifically has to be restrained, not just grabbed. To that end, the Doshaguma does have an extreme athletics, so it should have a decent chance on succeeding on attempts to do so, but I didn't want it to be able to do it off of any random old success. It has to have them well and secure in a proper hold to be able to use them as a weapon. The damage of this throw is based on the size of the creature being launched, starting at low damage for small creatures, and scaling with each size increase after that up to extreme damage for a huge creature. This borrows heavily from the regurgitate of the cave worm, which needs to have its creature swallowed, but I decided to have the damage dealt to both creatures unless the Doshaguma critically fails its strike. And if it manages to get a success, the creature hit needs to attempt a high DC Fortitude save to stay on its feet. Failure knocks them prone, which I think is a great setup for the Doshaguma's next ability, its Ravenous Charge. This is designed similar to a powerful charge type of ability, except rather than featuring extra damage or a bonus on its attack roll, it effectively adds improved grab to the strike. Which I suppose does mean that there are potentially 4 actions rolled into these 2 here, but given what other abilities of this sort tend to demonstrate, I think it's fine. It could also serve as a decent setup for Brutal Toss in the following round, giving you a really solid round to round. But it can get boring just cycling between 2 abilities. So aside from the other strikes in its arsenal, the array of athletics maneuvers available to it, and the occasional Demoralize, it also has Overturn Earth. This is inspired by the way that the Doshaguma will tear up the ground and fling it at the hunters, but I did want to mix things up a bit and give the Doshaguma something other than just damage. Therefore, while this ability affects a cone and requires a high DC reflex save, it only knocks a creature prone rather than dealing damage. The fact that it only leaves enemies prone and has no more severe effects led to me designing it as a single action rather than the 2 that most area effects are. The Doshaguma's final ability is not a standard sort of activated ability, but rather a buffing and rage. This draws from some pre-master rage design with a penalty to its AC, bringing it to in between low and moderate, but gives it a handful of temporary hit points and damage that bumps up all of its melee strikes by 1 level. So the moderate damage of its claws becomes high, whereas its already high jaws damage ascends to extreme damage. It's a rather simple slew of buffs that transform it into even more of a brute than its baseline design already is. On that topic, I did think about including Mauler as a fairly standard ursine ability, but I think it's already got plenty of damage elsewhere. For the gear of our grumpy growling guy, we have the fairly simple Powerhouse Pelt. This is a skill item, providing a bonus on athletics checks inspired by the Doshaguma's own considerable athletics, but there is a secondary aspect to it. The Doshaguma's Might Armor Set skill provides hunters with Powerhouse, increasing their damage after a successful Power Clash or offset attack. That's a little hard to translate into Pathfinder, so I decided to represent it as some bonus damage on reactions. Fighters should love this, but I think most classes can make use of this with the right feat investment. That's about the details on the Doshaguma though. A fluffy but ferocious furball, this fearsome fellow flies into a fury at the first fright of a fight, flinging foes with feral force before following with a flurry of fangs and fur. While the Doshaguma is something of a pack animal, these packs are tenuous at best and sustained only by the domination of the alpha over the others. If you're looking to run some Doshaguma as a pack, I'd represent the alpha with the elite adjustment, and typically run it alongside 2 others, as those seem to be the numbers they typically hunt in. Aside from operating in a pack, I think a Doshaguma makes a fantastic mount for a savage warlord of some sort, pinning down prey for its rider to brutally beat on. Let me know what you think of this creature and what other sorts of monsters you'd like to see in a comment. If you like what you see here and want more, be sure to leave a like and then subscribe to the channel. You can also check out the blog, which is linked below along with the Twitter and Discord. Thanks for watching, and have a monstrous Monday.